Hey, welcome to the mandatory. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button if you like the content, but also remember to follow us on our social media platforms at the mandatory TKO. We were talking about this earlier. Bryan was talking way too much. I cut him off on the audio side because then initially the whole entire segment would be gone. So I didn't want to give it away, which, by the way, that reminds me, you can also find us on the audio side. If you do, please leave a rate and review. Also give us a 5-star because we do some content for the audio side that you don't get on the video side. So Bryan, it was announced that Jake Paul will be taking on Mike Tyson July 20th. It's going to go down in Dallas and it's going to be on Netflix. Your thoughts on all of this?
Okay. There's a lot here. As of this recording, we're unclear as to whether or not this is going to be counted as a professional bout for either competitor, or it's going to be an exhibition. If it's going to be a pro bout, I think Mike Tyson is going to try to sleep Jake Paul. If it's going to be an exhibition, I think he may still, but I think he'll be a little more gentle with Jake Paul. We got a press release in our email regarding this from MVP. Thank you for that. It features the longest quote of all time you'll ever see on a press release from Jake Paul. I mean, Jesus Christ, this shit takes up like my entire screen and more. Mike Tyson has a much more succinct one. It's going to be boring to read either one, so I'm not going to do that. But in terms of this fight, I think it's interesting that Netflix is getting in the live sports game because they just aired a tennis match and it was very, very expensive, I would imagine. And Netflix has been wanting to get into this because live sports rights are where the money is at in terms of, or is where the money is at in terms of just profitability right now. If you have sports rights, you're going to get a whole bunch of people in the same spot at the same time watching your product. If it's going to be live sports, people tune into more because if you look at the daily shows and things of that nature, people are going to just watch it on their time. And live sports is a smart move for Netflix. It's something that they can use to sort of juice the app a little bit because they need something new other than the rare comedy special that resonates with people in that way, and just some shows here and there. So good for Netflix from that regard. And in terms of the actual fight, I mean, I'm not going to break this down in terms of stylistically. Mike Tyson, I will say this, he will be 58 years old shortly before this fight takes place. And I still think he's probably going to knock out Jake Paul. I think a lot of people are going to bet Mike Tyson by knockout. But to me, the pro versus exhibition distinction is important. I think if it's an exhibition, guys will take it a little more easy, Mike Tyson in particular. But if it's a pro fight and it counts on the record, then Mike Tyson and Jake Paul are going to go all out.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, and we kind of mentioned this a little bit off air, is the fact that it's going to be on Netflix. And so this probably means that Netflix is in line to probably get more live sports, right? Not just big pay-per-view events. Maybe they'll do one-off boxing fights, UFC fights, who knows? But this just means that Netflix is opening the door to be like, hey, you know what? We're here and we're probably going to have live sports here. I mean, this is essentially a test. It's a big test. And with what's going on with boxing, there are some deals that are going to be coming up pretty soon. Is Top Ring still going to be with ESPN? That's a question that I think a lot of people have. Now, I would love them to stay with ESPN. Of course, they do have fights on ESPN Plus, and I believe that does fairly well. But you never know with the fact that HBO left boxing, Showtime left boxing. Now PBC is with Amazon. We don't really know how that's really going to look all together yet, but the world is changing, times are changing, and it's going to the streaming world. And, let's give props to Jake Paul because he continues to make these types of moves that necessarily aren't happening right now. I mean, look at what he's done for women's boxing, right? Look at what he's done for a bunch of fighters that probably don't or wouldn't necessarily get that much of a payday, but he's bringing in dollars. Call him a YouTube fighter if you want, but Jake Paul's always doing something different. And him fighting on Netflix this would be the first boxing fight on Netflix, would it not? A pay-per-view fight on Netflix.
Yeah, and it's also noteworthy that he had a documentary. I think it may have been part of the Untold series called The Problem Child that I started watching and didn't finish. But Not because it was bad. I just had other things to do at that particular point. Like there's a prior relationship with him and Netflix there, and obviously, who doesn't want to get into business with Mike Tyson at this point, right? So it makes a lot of business sense. Jake Paul, like I've softened up on criticism in terms of like what the boxing actually is because I understand the business of what he's doing, or to some degree, right? Like I'm not fucking an aficionado to that level, right? But I understand why this sort of is impactful. He's ultimately been pretty good for boxing in totality. Now, the fights are one thing, but in terms of getting people to talk about the sport, getting people to watch the sport, pay attention to the sport, watch undercards, which is not a thing that happens in a lot of boxing cards. Like people actually tune in to watch the undercard for those fights, especially because like Amanda Serrano would be on the co-main. You've got other prospects who would be featured, and ultimately, I think the fights have been interesting, and boxing is enough of a shit show to where these things can happen, and to where I seriously think Jake Paul could actually find himself. I mean, this may get derailed once he loses to Mike Tyson, but he's angling for a world championship bout in the future. And I think one of the organizations, all of which we know are full of shit, one of them will probably jump at the opportunity to present him with a world title match because the business side of it, which I've been talking about over the last, however many months at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, he's fighting Mike Tyson, and I don't think Mike Tyson's gonna go easy on him. Like, I don't care if, it's it's gonna be one of those things where it's not counted towards his record or not, if it's a professional bout.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Mike Tyson's gonna care. Mike Tyson's gonna go in there and bring it because that's what Mike Tyson does. He's always been like that, right? He's an absolute dog. So I think Jake Paul is in for an extremely tough test because when we saw Mike Tyson back in the ring with Roy Jones, Mike Tyson looked good. He
Yeah.
still looked really good, right? So this is more of an entertaining bout because if you look at Jake Paul, you look at his fan base, a lot of younger kids. And then as you know, Mike Tyson is a whole entire generations that loved Mike Tyson. I know I did growing up. He was one of the reasons I fell in love with boxing. So I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this fight because the old heads are going to be like, yo, I want to see Mike Tyson knock out Jake Paul. And the younger people are probably possibly, if you're a Jake Paul fan, you're definitely going to be rooting for Jake Paul. So I think it's one of those things where the fact that it's on Netflix, I feel like majority of people have Netflix. Like there's no one that I talk to and they're like, I don't have Netflix, or they use someone's password. Like, let's be serious here, right? Like everyone, that's the one app I feel everyone has. Not everyone has Amazon. Not everybody has DAZN. Not everybody has YouTube TV like it. But the one thing that everyone really has is Netflix. Like I think that's the one thing people can agree on. So I think it's going to be interesting. I want to see how Netflix puts it on. I think that's the most important thing. But nonetheless, anytime Mike Tyson's name is brought up, he's getting in the ring. He's not the same Mike Tyson, obviously, a little bit older, but people are going to tune into this. People are going to buy it. And I mean, hey, if it makes money, it makes sense. And that's the business side.
Yeah. And I want to be clear. Like, I don't, I don't think Jake Paul should be fighting for a world title, but part of if you have a problem with this, I wouldn't even look at Jake Paul as being the problem. I would look at the sport. The sport allows itself for these things to happen. The sport and the way it's mismanaged, like it's not managed like a proper sport. There's not a true governing body you could trust who's overseeing all the stuff in it. Like the shape that boxing is in, that's why this is what it is. And that's why the sport allows itself to become a circus, and for people like Jake Paul to infiltrate it very successfully and make an impact on a shorter amount of time, to the point where honestly he's one of the most watched quote unquote boxers in the world, and is one of the, I don't know, 10 or so boxers that people around the world probably care about the most, despite the fact that he's not a world-class level boxer. We're not even sure he's a good one professionally at all. But this is where the sport is right now. Like literally, guys have trouble becoming stars. He is one. And we're still not even sure he's good at his job, or his second job, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, here at the Mandatory, we want to know if you're going to be tuning in to Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Who are you taking on this fight, who you're going to be betting on. I'm sure lines are going to come out early because, I mean, listen,
by the time people watch this,
the lines will be out. They do come out early at times. So let us know who you're rocking with. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. How do you see that all going down? And how do you feel about Netflix as well, holding a pay-per-view bout on their stream? Also, what do you think it means for the business of boxing? Let us know. Drop your comments. Also, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for rocking with us. And we'll be back with some betting as well for you. Make sure to check out the channel because we got some good ones coming up for you. So thanks so much for rocking with us. Bryan, any final words before we get up and out of here? Because I cut you off on the audio side.
Mike Tyson by knockout.